they will tell you that emptiness is the price of power. That the man who stops explaining himself has lost something human. Watch how fast they say it. The moment you go quiet, the moment you stop defending yourself, somebody in the room calls it cold, calls it damaged, calls it a wall. Here is what they will not tell you. The world does not reward the man who feels the most. It rewards the man who is still standing, still thinking clearly, while everyone around him is drowning in their own emotion. That is not a theory. That is the first law of cold power, and almost nobody survives long enough to learn it, because learning it costs something most men are not willing to pay. You already know the moment I am talking about. Somebody said something that cut you open, and your mouth started moving before your mind caught up. You explained. You justified. You reached for approval, like a drowning man reaches for driftwood. And somewhere in that reaching, you handed them the one thing they needed to finish you. Proof that it landed. Machiavelli wrote about princes and courts, but he was really writing about this exact moment. The moment a man's face tells the room everything his mouth is trying to hide. Today we take that apart, piece by piece. Not the polite version. The version that actually works when somebody is trying to break you in front of people you respect. By the end, you will understand why silence is not withdrawal. It is data collection. Why the pause is not weakness. It is the most expensive weapon in the room. And why the men who look untouchable were not born that way. They built it, one refusal at a time. Let us start with the wound nobody wants to name. Every man carries a hunger to be liked. It is old, older than strategy, wired into him before he could speak. And in most rooms, that hunger is harmless. But in a room with a sharp operator, a manipulative boss, a partner who knows exactly which words unlock you, a rival who studies your face for a living, that hunger becomes the exact door they walk through. Here is the part that stings. You cannot out-argue a manipulator, because arguing requires you to reveal what actually hurts. Every time you explain yourself to someone working against you, you are handing them a map. This is Machiavelli's cold logic, and it disturbs everyone who first hears it. The prince who explains his fear to his enemies has already lost the war, because now the enemies know exactly where to press. So the first move is not confidence. It is separation. You take the feeling and you take the strategy, and you refuse to let them share the same face. The feeling is allowed to exist. It is not allowed to speak. Picture the scenario. A colleague undermines you in a meeting, smiling the whole time, dressing the insult as a joke. Your chest tightens. Your first instinct is to correct the record immediately, to prove them wrong in front of everyone. That instinct is the trap. The moment you defend yourself with heat, you confirm the hit landed, and now the room remembers your reaction, not their insult. The operator who has done this before does something different. He lets the comment sit in the air for 1 full second longer than is comfortable. He does not rush to fill the silence. He responds with a flat, almost bored question. Is that what you think happened? And lets the other person explain themselves into a corner. No defense was launched. No wound was shown. The attack simply had nowhere to land. This is not suppression. Suppression is pretending the feeling does not exist, and it always leaks out sideways, usually at the worst possible time. What we are describing is something colder and more useful. Acknowledging the feeling, privately, fully, honestly, and then making a decision that the feeling does not get a vote in how you respond publicly. Machiavelli called this the difference between appearing and being. You can feel gutted and appear unmoved. Those are not contradictions. That is the entire skill. Here is the redefinition that matters. Calmness is not the absence of feeling. Calmness is the refusal to let feeling choose your face. Most men think composure means feeling nothing. It does not. It means feeling everything and letting none of it show until you have decided it should. If you understand that distinction, write it down, comment it, own it. Comment the words, "I move in silence right now," because that sentence is about to become the operating principle for everything that follows. Because separating your face from your feelings is only step one. Step two is what you do with all that attention you just freed up. And this is where most men waste it. Most men, once they stop reacting, still keep talking. They think restraint means fewer outbursts, not less noise altogether. But real restraint redirects the energy somewhere far more useful, toward watching. There is a particular kind of person who says almost nothing in a room, and somehow leaves knowing more than everyone who spoke. Not because they are naturally gifted, because they made a decision early. Every word they do not say is a piece of information they get to collect instead. Watch how people behave when they think no one is paying attention. The colleague who is polite to your face and short with the assistant. The friend who agrees with everything you say when you are winning and goes quiet the moment you struggle. These are not small details. These are the entire personality file, delivered for free by people who assume silence means you are not watching. Machiavelli's court operators understood this instinctively. In a room full of men performing loyalty, the ones who survived were not the loudest defenders of the prince. They were the ones cataloguing who flattered too much, who disappeared during conflict, who changed their story depending on the audience. Information was the actual currency. Talking was just how amateurs spent it too early. Here is a technique worth stealing directly. When someone is trying to read you or provoke you, do not answer their question. Ask them a better one. Why does that matter to you? What made you bring that up right now? Watch what happens. Most people cannot resist explaining themselves once you turn the mirror back on them. And in that explanation, they hand you exactly what they came to take from you. You wanted their intentions. They just gave you their intentions, for free, because they assumed the question was your weakness instead of your strategy. This is the part where I have to step outside the lesson for a second, because there is a pattern here most people miss entirely. We are taught that confidence means speaking first, claiming the room, setting the tone out loud, but actual power in most rooms belongs to whoever speaks last, because they had the most information when they finally opened their mouth. The loud man in the meeting is rarely the one who runs it. The quiet man taking notes usually is. Confidence was never about volume. It was about sequence, who gathers and who reveals. So the observer does not just protect himself. He starts predicting people. Once you know that a person always deflects with humor under pressure, you know exactly how they will behave the next time you corner them. Once you know a person overpromises when they feel guilty, you know precisely when they are lying to your face. This is not paranoia. This is pattern recognition, and pattern recognition is the closest thing to seeing the future that a man is allowed to have. And here is where it turns from defense into something sharper. Once you can predict a manipulator's next move, you can let them walk directly into it. You do not need to fight the trap. You let them set it. And then you simply do not step where they expected you to step. Their whole strategy assumed a version of you that reacts. When that version does not show up, their strategy has nothing left to work with. If you have ever caught someone manipulating you in real time, just by watching instead of reacting, comment, "I see what others ignore." Because that skill only gets sharper from here. And the next block is about the moment everyone gets tested the hardest. The moment you are insulted, and every part of you wants to answer immediately. Reaction is the most expensive gift you can hand another person, and almost nobody realizes they are giving it away for free. Think about what a reaction actually is. It is information about your interior delivered instantly, without editing, without strategy, straight from the nervous system to the enemy's hands. Every flinch tells them where the wound is. Every fast comeback tells them the insult worked. You are, in that moment, doing their reconnaissance for them. Machiavelli's central obsession was timing. Not goodness, not honesty, timing. He observed that men who acted from impulse were predictable, and predictable men were already defeated. They just had not been told yet. The prince who paused, who let the offense sit, who chose his moment instead of being chosen by the moment, held all the actual power in the exchange. Here is the scenario every man has lived through. Someone insults you in front of people whose opinion matters to you. Your ears go hot. Every cell in your body wants a comeback, wants the room to see you win this exchange right now. This is the exact second the entire outcome gets decided, and it gets decided before you say a single word. The undisciplined move is the fast comeback, clever, maybe, but launched from heat, and heat always looks like heat, no matter how good the words are. The room does not remember your wit. They remember that you needed to respond immediately, and needing to respond is its own kind of confession. The disciplined move is the pause, not a dramatic pause, not a performance of restraint, a genuine, unhurried silence that says, without a single word, that the insult did not even register as urgent. Let it sit for 3 full seconds. Let the person who threw it start to wonder if it landed at all. Then respond on your schedule, in your tone, about something else entirely if you choose. You have just demonstrated, without arguing a single point, that their attack was not worth your tempo. Stoic philosophy called this the gap between stimulus and response, and inside that gap is the only real freedom a man has in conflict. Machiavelli called it patience disguised as strength. Both are describing the same 3 seconds, and both are describing the difference between a man who is played and a man who plays. There is a deeper reason the pause works, beyond just looking composed. Unpredictability is disorienting to a manipulator, because manipulation depends on a script. They have run this move on other people, and it worked, because those people reacted on cue. When you do not react on cue, their entire script breaks, and now they are the one improvising in public, without preparation. You have not just protected yourself, you have flipped who is exposed. This does not mean silence forever. It means silence as a choice, deployed with intent, instead of silence as an absence, forced by fear. There is a difference between the man who has nothing to say and the man who has decided this is not the moment to say it. One is empty, the other is loaded. And this leads directly into the harder truth, the one most people resist the longest. Being unreadable is not the same as being dishonest, and most men confuse the two right up until it costs them. Honesty is telling the truth when it matters. Exposure is telling everyone everything, all the time, because you have not built the discipline to know the difference. Machiavelli never argued for lying as a lifestyle. He argued for information control, which is a completely different discipline. A prince who reveals every plan, every weakness, every fear to anyone who asks is not virtuous. He is simply unarmed. Every piece of personal information you hand a stranger, your insecurities, your plans, your triggers, becomes a lever they can use later, whether or not they intended to use it maliciously at the time. This is not about becoming secretive out of paranoia. It is about recognizing that oversharing is not intimacy. Oversharing is inventory, and you are handing it to people who have not earned the right to hold it. Watch how manipulation actually works, mechanically. It runs on two levers, almost exclusively: craving and fear. Someone learns what you crave, usually approval, and they dangle it just out of reach to keep you performing for them. Or they learn what you fear, usually rejection or humiliation, and they threaten it just enough to keep you compliant. Both levers require the same raw material: your openly stated wants and openly stated fears. The man who reveals none of that, not through coldness, but through discipline, starves both levers before they can be built. You cannot dangle approval in front of someone who has not told you they need it. You cannot threaten rejection against someone who has not shown you it terrifies him. This is the actual mechanism behind why certain people seem impossible to manipulate. It is not that they are unusually strong. It is that they simply never handed out the blueprint. This is worth sitting inside for a moment, because it reframes something most men get backward. We are taught that being known is the goal. Be authentic, be open. Let people see the real you. And with people who have earned that access, that is exactly right. But being known by everyone is not intimacy. It is exposure without a filter. And a man without a filter is not vulnerable in the romantic sense. He is simply unprotected, standing in a room full of people, some of whom are keeping score. Building that filter is not about becoming a stranger to the people who matter. It is about making sure the people who have not earned your information do not get it by default, simply because they asked, simply because silence felt rude. Silence is not rude. Silence is a boundary wearing a calm face. Right now you have 4 operating principles. Separate the feeling from the face. Collect information instead of spending words. Let the pause do the work reaction never could. Control what leaves your mouth, so no one is handed a weapon they did not earn. Each one on its own changes how a room treats you. Together, they start to compound into something people will describe as presence, without being able to explain why. But there is a deeper trap waiting on the other side of all this discipline, and it has nothing to do with enemies or manipulators. It has to do with the people you actually care about, and what happens when caring turns into waiting. That is where we go next. Attachment is not weakness. Dependency is, and most men never learn the difference until they are staring at a phone screen, waiting for 3 dots to appear. Here is the confusion Machiavelli would have dismantled instantly. Caring about someone is not the problem. Needing their response in order to feel stable is the problem, because the moment your stability depends on another person's behavior, you have handed them the steering wheel to your own nervous system, and most of them do not even know they are driving it. Think about the specific psychology of the man checking his phone every few minutes after sending a message that mattered to him. He tells himself he is just curious. He is not. He is regulating his anxiety through someone else's response time, and every minute without a reply reads as evidence, even though it usually means nothing at all. This is not a character flaw, it is a wiring issue, and wiring can be changed. The alternative is not becoming cold to the people who matter. It is building a life sturdy enough that no single person's response time can knock it over. A man with his own rigorous morning, his own training, his own work that demands his full attention is not performing detachment when he does not check his phone for 4 hours. He is simply occupied by something that does not require another person's permission to continue. This is the actual definition of independence. Machiavelli was circling in his writing on fortune and self-reliance. He argued that a prince who built his strength on his own foundation, his own army, his own resources, was secure, while a prince who depended on borrowed strength was always one betrayal away from collapse. Translate that into a modern man's life, and the lesson does not change. Build your stability on your own discipline, and someone else's silence stops being able to end your day. If you are still here, it is not because you were being polite, and it is not because you scroll through everything without thinking. You are still here because some part of you already suspected this, that most of what passes for emotional pain in a man's life is actually a dependency problem, wearing a heartbreak costume. You stayed because you wanted the mechanism, not the sympathy. That instinct is rare, and it is the same instinct that will get you through the rest of this. Now here is where the pause turns into something with teeth. If reacting is expensive and observing is valuable, the next question is what you do with someone who has already proven they only respect you when you are useful to them. This is where boundaries stop being a self-help buzzword and start being a Machiavellian instrument. Every relationship, personal or professional, runs on an invisible ledger of reward and consequence, whether anyone admits it or not. People behave the way they behave because it has worked on you before. The friend who only calls when he needs something keeps calling because you keep answering with the same enthusiasm every time, regardless of the pattern. You have taught him, through repetition, that there is no cost to using you. This is a lesson in operant conditioning that Machiavelli would have recognized immediately, even without the modern vocabulary. Reward what you want repeated, and withdraw reward from what you do not. The mistake most men make is trying to fix ingratitude with a conversation. They explain how they feel, hoping the other person will suddenly understand and change. This rarely works, because you are appealing to insight in someone who has already shown you, through action, that insight is not what is driving them. The move that actually works is quieter and considerably more uncomfortable to execute. You do not announce the boundary. You do not deliver a speech about how you deserve better. You simply reduce your presence, without explanation, without ultimatum. The favors stop arriving as quickly. The enthusiasm in your replies flattens. The energy you used to hand out freely gets redirected toward people who have earned it. No argument was launched. No confrontation was needed. The consequence simply arrived on its own schedule, and it arrived louder than any speech could have. This is uncomfortable for most men because it feels passive, even petty, at first. It is neither. It is precise. Arguing gives the ungrateful person a stage and an audience. You, explaining your worth to someone who has already decided your worth does not matter. Withdrawal gives them nothing to argue with, because there is no confrontation to win. There is only your absence, and absence is the one argument that cannot be talked out of. There is a phrase worth carrying out of this block. Boundaries are not walls. Walls keep everyone out. Boundaries are pricing. They tell the world exactly what access to you costs, and the people worth keeping around will pay it without resentment, because respect was never the expensive part. Only entitlement finds it expensive. Now for the part almost nobody wants to hear, because it involves the pain you are already carrying, and most self-help content tells you to release it, forgive it, move past it as fast as possible. Machiavelli would have told you something colder and considerably more useful. Do not release the pain. Interrogate it. Every betrayal, every humiliation, every moment someone read you accurately enough to hurt you. That is not just damage, that is data. And data is the one thing a strategic man never throws away. The question worth asking after any wound is not, how do I stop hurting? It is, what did this person see in me that I did not see in myself? And how do I make sure it never works again? This reframes the entire event. The man who was manipulated because he needed approval too visibly now knows exactly which door was used against him, and he can close it permanently. The man who was blindsided because he trusted too fast now knows the specific tell he missed. The compliment that arrived too early, the vulnerability that was shared too quickly by the other person, engineered to earn trust ahead of schedule. None of this pain disappears. All of it becomes instruction. There is a particular trap here worth naming directly, because it catches sharp men especially. The desire for revenge feels like strength, but it is usually the last thing dependency looks like before it fully lets go. Revenge requires the other person's continued attention. It requires you to still be organizing part of your life around them, even in opposition. The man who has actually finished processing a betrayal does not need the other person to suffer. He needs the other person to become irrelevant, and irrelevance is a far heavier verdict than any confrontation could ever deliver. Think of it the way a fighter thinks of a scar. He does not spend his career trying to erase it. He trains around it, works with the exact knowledge that a specific weakness in his body used to exist, and builds his whole style with that knowledge folded in. The scar becomes part of the technique. It stops being a wound and starts being an advantage nobody else in the room has, because nobody else paid what he paid to get it. This is the actual meaning of turning pain into intelligence, not positivity, not forgiveness performed for an audience. A cold, private audit of exactly what happened, exactly what it cost, and exactly what will never be allowed to happen the same way twice. Which brings us to what all of this has been building toward. Not comfort, not peace of mind as most people define it, but something closer to what Machiavelli actually meant by a prince who could not be conquered. Becoming unbeatable does not mean winning every conflict. It means reaching a point where most conflicts stop being able to reach you at all. The insult that used to ruin your afternoon becomes a sentence you barely register. The friend who used to have the power to wreck your week with silence becomes someone whose silence you simply do not organize your time around anymore. This is not numbness. It is architecture, a structure built deliberately, one refusal at a time, until very little in a normal week has the leverage to knock it down. Machiavelli's princes who lasted were not the ones who won every battle. They were the ones who stopped fighting battles that were beneath the cost of fighting them. A man who has separated his feelings from his face, who observes before he speaks, who lets the pause do his negotiating, who reveals nothing he has not chosen to reveal, who has built a life sturdy enough that no one's response time can shake it, who prices access instead of arguing for respect, who turns every wound into a permanently closed door. That man is not fighting small wars anymore. He has simply outgrown the size of the arena. Everyone else is still fighting in. This was never about becoming cruel, and it was never about becoming empty. It was about refusing to keep handing your face to people who were never going to use it kindly. The world will keep calling this coldness, because the world is comfortable with men who explain themselves, apologize too fast, and can be read from across the room. That comfort was never for your benefit, it was for theirs. You do not owe anyone your reaction. You do not owe anyone your explanation. You do not owe anyone access to the parts of you that took the longest to build. The only question worth carrying out of this video is simple, and it deserves a real answer, not a performed one. What is the one reaction you are still giving away for free to someone who has never once earned it? Comment your answer below. One sentence, no explanation required. And if this is the first time you have heard power described this coldly, and it actually landed, stay through and the next one. Because this is only the first law.